So let's go ahead and get started here. This is fairly easy to do. This is not anything extremely complicated or anything like that. We don't have to do any big cropping or masking or anything. But what I'm going to do is just zoom into this gentleman here, and you can follow along with this tutorial. You can use this stock image here that I have. And what I'm going to do first is basically just cut his face or his head out of this image and then paste it over in this image here. And then after that, we will start to rotate and size the image to fit perfectly over her face here. Let's go back over here, and what I'm going to do is just select the lasso tool on the toolbar. I'll zoom out here a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is, I don't have to be really that neat. We don't have to crop this image right on the edge of his face here. Okay, we really don't have to do that, because we're going to be doing some masking techniques later on that will make it much easier to match this face up with the others. So let's just go ahead and draw a selection around his head here, but also including some of the neck as well, because that will help us and allow us to blend more areas of his skin, and that will make things look a little bit more realistic. I want to go ahead and just make sure I select his entire forehead there at the top, and we can use some of his forehead on the other image as well. Let's come up here to Edit and Copy, and then let's switch back over to this image, and actually we can probably just go ahead and close this out because we don't need that any longer. And then what I'll do is come over here to Edit and Paste. And you can see that these two images, the gentleman here and also the two girls in the back, you can see that they are very similar in resolution. The size is very similar, and so that helps with the quality. If you have a very low resolution and then you have a high resolution image and you're trying to combine the two faces together, well, the quality is not going to be as good because you're trying to blow up a small image to fit a larger image, and you're going to see a huge decrease in quality there. So the first thing, what I'm going to do is double click on layer 1, and let's just give this a new name. I'll just call this man. The best way to match this face up with the one behind it here, which is the girl on the right, is turn down the opacity of this layer before you start transforming this layer. So go over to the opacity and just lower that down somewhere around 60 to 70%. Should work pretty good. That way you can see the image below it here, and by doing this we can make sure that the eyes and the nose and the mouth somewhat line up in the closest positions as possible. I'm going to come over here to Edit and down here to Free Transform now that we've lowered the opacity, and then I'll hold down the Shift key on the keyboard and just come up here to the corner of this image, click and drag down, and I'll just pull this up, and what I'll probably do is just make this a little bit larger here so we can see those transformation handles a little bit easier. And then I'll rotate this image. Because we've lowered the transparency of that layer, or lowered the opacity, we can match up the eyes and the mouth. You see that? Because if we didn't lower that, then we would have to guess. We would have to move it out of the way and all that. So, but we've lowered the opacity, so now we can match this up as close as possible. And I'll just resize this down. There we go. So I'm just moving this around to get it to match this as close as possible. I want to go ahead and up here to View and zoom in at one level, and I'll just keep moving this around here to match this up. Now I'll probably want to make sure that his face is overlapping, that it's going outside of her face in the back there. You can see if I zoom in really closely, and if I scroll down, you can see right here, this is the edge of his face, and right here is her face. So if we overlap that, then that will allow us to cover that up just a little bit more. But also keep in mind that her face in the back here is very close to her face over here. So go ahead and cancel that. But you can see that this is where the two heads almost touch. So we have to really watch that and match this up as close as possible. Also, her eyebrows are right there, and I could just move this down a little bit. And it looks like his chin, her chin's right about here. Her chin ends right about here, but his is like sticking way out. So I can make this a little bit smaller. There we go. And it's okay if he has a bigger chin there, being that he is a man. So I guess they just have bigger chins. So it's okay if that sticks out a little bit right there. And since we've cropped some of his neck here then we can blend that in with her neck as well. And this is really a fun thing to do if you want to trick people or make something that looks kind of funny or whatever you want to do. That looks pretty good right there. I think I'm going to go ahead and leave that. And then I'll go ahead and click on this arrow at the top on the options bar to confirm that transformation. Or I can press the enter key on the keyboard to confirm that as well. And then what we can do is increase the opacity after we've confirmed that. And we can see that face over right there. And you can see how it just matches up like that. So yeah, you guessed it, what we're going to do is erase some of the outer areas around his face here to make that blend in with the image behind it. So what we can do is create a layer mask on this layer so we don't directly edit the layer itself there. So let's just come down to the bottom of the layers palette right here and click on this Add Layer Mask button right here, and then select the paintbrush on the toolbar and make sure that the foreground color is set to black. And then we can right click on the image and adjust the size of the brush here with the master diameter. And to start, we can use just a hardness of 0, which will give us the softest masking effect possible. I'm going to lower that just a little bit more. But I can come in here and paint on this mask here. Let me go ahead and pull this out. And with the palette options, I'll just go ahead and increase the size of those thumbnails there. And I'll start to paint on this mask, and you can see what's happening here. And since I will probably use the ear of the girl behind there, I can just go ahead and erase that away. The bigger the brush you have, the more softer and the more gradual. Let's say if I hold my brush right here, if I click, it might erase away too much. But if I hold the brush a little bit outside of the area like this, you see where that line is right there, but if I hold it outside, click, and then move my mouse, you can see how it just slowly starts to fade away. And I'm barely touching this layer on this mask. I'm just going really outside here because I want these to blend in really nicely. Look at that. Then I'll go up on the top of the forehead and I'll do the same thing. I'll just take this big brush and I'll ride this along the very top. I won't come down here and start doing this. I'll just make sure I stay on that edge so it's very gradual. Look at that. I'll come over here. And this way we can get the wrinkles of his head in there like that. Okay, it's looking pretty cool. I'll go ahead and zoom in here, and I'll just take this brush once more and lower it down just a touch, and I'll start to paint on his neck here and make that gradual. Look at that. It's amazing how this exact same process has been repeated on this course so many times, and I think once you've mastered this whole masking process by making a layer mask and then painting on that mask, you can just with this little technique here, you can do so many things in Photoshop, and really that's what it's all about. You don't need to master every single little tool and filter in Photoshop to create great looking graphics. You just don't. You just have to understand a few little things, but I think a lot of people overlook very simple masking techniques like this. Also, just using a soft brush. A lot of people will mask with a lot harder brush, and it's a dead giveaway that they've done that. Like if I use this, it's just not very realistic because it's not a gradual blend. And you can see that his skin tones here are much different than the girl's skin tones in the back. Well, that's another big part of this tutorial, is I'm going to show you how to match the skin tones, because it has to match. If it doesn't, then it's just going to look kind of fake, having his color skin there and then having her lighter brown skin in the back. So, but I'm going to zoom in here towards the bottom so I can see this a little bit closer. What I like to do is always zoom into my images when I'm working on them, get as close as possible. Now it looks like to me I masked a little bit too much into his chin here. So what I can do is press the D and X keys on the keyboard. It looks like in this case I can just press the D key, and what will happen is that will change the foreground to white. Then what I can do is paint on his chin here and bring back his chin just a little bit more. Look at that. I may even go just a little bit farther, all the way to the edge there, like this, and then I will press the X key on the keyboard, and that will make the foreground change to black. And so we'll paint with black on this layer mask. I'll go ahead and decrease the hardness there, and then I'll just ride right along this edge. If you could see this white stuff here, that was the background on our original image that we had of this gentleman here. So we're just getting rid of that white, which also it creates a glow around his face there. So we want to remove that. I'm going to right click and lower the hardness all the way down to 0 just to make sure this is nice and soft here. Look at that. Just putting a little bit extra effort here around his face. It's really going to make a big difference. A little more time we spend on this and to really get in there. And I want to change that foreground to white again, and then come in here. It looks like we got some yellow back there, which it looks like there's part of her shoulder there is coming through. Well, I think that'll pass if I zoom out, as long as it's not too conflicting. Looks a little soft around here, but I can come back to that later. Just want to make sure that I'm on that edge there. There we go. Just so it's very gradual there, and I'll zoom in really close and go along up here. Sometimes having no hardness is just a little bit too much, almost too soft. So this is a very very therapeutic type process here. Look at that. So I can see the edge. We want to see some edge there. You don't want it to blend too much. So if there's a little slight glow, that's okay. And I'll leave that for now. I can come back to that later if I want. Okay, so I'll come back and touch that up if I need to later on. Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with that edge. At least we could probably sharpen it up just a little bit more, but I'll come back to that. So let's take a look around here. And we have his forehead at the top here. That looks like it blends really nicely. We could probably go back and touch that up just a little bit with a soft brush. So I'll turn the hardness all the way down, and then I'll ride my brush just along his forehead here at the top.